3, 2, 1, action!
Hi everyone, my name is Jacek Szymanski and I am director of food and tabletop commercials. In my Footloose podcast, I meet people who have a clear impact of the food film industry. They are masters at what they do. In this episode, Merijn Schilte. We met between shots in Milan, slightly tired, but it was great to hear how tabletop SFX was starting to take a shape until now. He started in the theater in 1997, when no one knew special effects for food. He invented rigs, but there were no directions on how to show food in an interesting way, differently with effects. A great field of improvisation, where throwing, smashing, making mistakes was the only one way to perfection in tabletop shots. Enjoy! Thank you, Merijn, very much for accepting the invitation to my podcast.
Thank you.
We have talked many times on various topics, and your way of seeing the world is very close to mine. But now we will talk about the difficulties of and mystery of your work.
Okay.
But first of all, I want to say that I'm not a journalist, but sometimes I like to write a short story. At the request of Agnieszka Celej from the directory hub of Studio Bice, I wrote a column about how difficult it is to tell the children in my daughter's preschool about my work. It was a big challenge for me. Mm-hmm. If some of you have 4 minutes free and want to read my column, the link is on my Instagram to the directory page, or I will give you a link below in this podcast. If someone outside of our industry asks you, Merijn, what are you doing? What is your response?
Of course, it happened to me many times, and then I'm always saying, you better ask my wife, because I'm not good in explaining it.
Really?
Yeah.
And usually, what's his response from your wife?
What's her answer?
Exactly. Long story short.
Yeah, well, basically, what I start with when it's really like people who don't know, then it's the burger on one hand, as example. So it's like many people know the burger, following the ingredients, and then at the end it's a full burger. How does it come there, and what's the technique to get it there by repeating it and changing the little salad or the tomato or the cheese slice in a nice way, and we can adjust it on 1,000, 1,500, 2,000 frames, like in frame, and we can time it with the robot. So yeah, that's the simple version of how to explain, because that's for most people known. Mm-hmm. A known thing, the burger falling. And then when people are more interested, I'm talking about chocolate meeting, 2 streams of chocolate meeting each other. We fly around, those kind of things. And then trying to explain that we use different kind of chocolates to get it. And sometimes, especially at the start, we're busy for 1 week to get 1 shot done. We did like 1, 2, 3 shots a day, mm-hmm. Which is completely different to the present. Like we have to work fast and get it done in a short time. So we're really depending on our experience from the old days, while we had the time to test, or we took the time to test, which is different. Yeah.
We have already talked about it, but I would like to say what happened that you are doing, what you are doing. How did you become an SFX engineer?
Of course, I thought about it already a bit, like, again, how to explain where did I get, because for me it's like in multiple things. Mm-hmm. The way of life, how it goes. So
how you started? Yeah, there was some kind of reason that you become an SFX engineer.
Well, let's start by saying that the first and direct line was Rijn van der Wouw, which was like my companion in the tabletop, and he started a lot already testing and doing stuff with timing with Ronald Koetsier, especially on a time when we have an age difference of 10 years. So in the time before I started in 97 with Wil van der Vlucht Film Productions, and Ronald Koetsier, who was the DOP and cameraman and doing everything with Wil, live action stuff. That was Ronald is my teacher for all the time. I know him for all the time, but at some point they did a lot of live action. I thought I want to do some completely different, and it has always been like I've been on two places. I have on one side the theater, and on the other side there was always commercial and film. And what you did when you've been in theater? What kind of profession you had there? Let's start in a good way. I was so I did a commercial school. That was in 94, I think. A commercial school where I had to do a traineeship, and that was Wil van der Vlucht. When I was there, I thought like, okay, this is it. This is the rest of my life. Being together in a group of people, working on one film, and for me, everything was possible. So, and especially in those times with Ronald as a teacher, he learned me everything. So it was not like, okay, you just have to make films and that's it. He was like, no, you got to know everything from light. So you need to know the stands, you need to know the equipment that we're using, but also with the camera. We were shooting on celluloid, so you need to change the max and everything you needed to know. And I felt like, okay, this is the family where I want to be with. This is dynamic. I can do everything I want. This is okay. This is good. So after half year, I was like totally exhausted because there were many jobs, and I did every job. I was 17, 18. So 17, 18 when I started working there for training during my school.
Quick question: what about the competitors at that time? What about others, like other people like you? Competitors.
I was just like a production.
I tried to figure out what kind of market was at that times.
But I'm talking about the company Wil van der Vlucht, which was like a big company at that time, which thought globally. Comparing to the times now, it was not looking only in Amsterdam. It was looking globally. He was partly American wife, so that's why he could do. Global. We did the biggest things, and that's how it felt like. But because it were the big brands who were global, there was more money, so there was more possibilities. I was very happy at that time. After half year, I was totally exhausted. I remember the last week of my traineeship, I was like 2 weeks. I was laying in bed, like, okay, I've done it. So. I think during the end, I was like, okay, I know this is it. This is the family I want to be with. It's not especially the family at Wil van der Vlucht, but just being
the industry,
being on set, and try to do the best as possible, deliver high-end stuff, and if we have fun, that's a plus, so, of course. But that was basically not my first thing. But the fun came with the job and what you achieved. So I want to do completely different just to be sure that this is right. Like, what if I do something else which had nothing to do with film or anything, just to see. So I was convinced, but okay. So then I started in another family, which is a theater company. It's called Orkater, Orchestra and Theater. And it was a very it was a young group, but it has a history already of making music and playing theater. It was a new kind of thing. They also were, for the theater groups, pretty global in traveling around. They welcomed me in the family, and that's where I learned where film is more hierarchic. So where there's like you have the director who decides everything. and then you all have your departments, like you have the light crew, and everybody has their department, so you cannot exchange in between a bit. Like if you're light, you're light. You're not gonna say something about, except of course with the team of Wil van de Vlucht, it was more like a family. So you could do something with light. It was not like, no, you cannot touch the stand. They wanted you to do something with the stand. If you need to do something, change lenses, you have to be ready to change the lens. Because you know it, you have to be safe, of course. But that was the. But in the family of theater, the hierarchy is a bit different in the family where I came. So I was a bit surprised by myself that I liked it too. But there were parts of both worlds which I liked. The good thing about the theater is that there is less money and you got more freedom to find things out. So while I'm skipping now a big part, every time when I did 4 or 5 years theater, then there was 4 or 5 years of film. And every time I made a step. When you have the Luna Park, you have these stairs where you step on one and you go, but because you're going from left to the right, you go higher. So this is the feeling I have with this combination of doing theater and film. So every time I was bored at some time. So then I'm only on my right leg, because then I'm like, okay, so I know this. Like, okay, so you fill up the truck, you set up the show, and then you're doing the show, which is basically the same for me, having the performance for live audience. You have to perform, you have to be there. That's the exact same thing what you're doing on set. You have to be, we just have to manage it before 12. You have to get all the shots done, and then it's the next thing. And you try the best as you can, and try to be creative, and try to also have an overview on what's happening. So the Luna Park feeling is what for me theater. And every time when I came back to the theater, I got new things. So in theater you had like the new lights, which the movable heads of the lights, to operate those kind of things, which for me every time it's a challenge. I'm like, okay, so that's something new, I want to learn. So then I saw that there's this XYZ, which is something you use at robotics too. Robotics we're using with the burger to fly around. Okay, so that's interesting. Okay, so when I learned from the lights in the theater, I learned from the robotics in film. So every time there was this challenging thing, which every time I got surprised, which is basically for me the power behind what I'm doing, to surprise myself every time. And the dynamics is what I like to see. Like, okay, something new, okay, how can we do it? Don't know, but we'll get there. And that's what kept me going also. Yeah, like perform and to get something nice, something new, like let's combine. Is it possible? Oh, okay, let's try. So I'm going a bit from back and forth. I hope you understand the line of what happened. But this is like from the history. So basically, end of the story is like I had the film, and then I went to theater. I liked them both, but both worlds helped me. And for me, it felt it's the same. It's the same kind of world. You have to perform at one point, and like I said, they both have their advantage and challenges. Like I said, the theater, there's not so much money, but with theater I also been all over the world. I learned the people in Korea, in Spain. But with theater you stay somewhere for a month, so then you understand how the people are, and you get more used to different countries and different things. Because with your film, when you're shooting somewhere, it's always with your own crew, so then it's a different dynamic. But everything I did helped me to get a next step.
So I have a feeling that you are in good position because you say that part of your past days was in theater. So I have a feeling that part of your soul right now is more artistic than not the more, but you have like a half soul. Half is artistic and half is engineer, and they are match each other. So it's very important, because some of the people who are SFX engineer, they are only an engineer, so they are of course, they are very precisely, they are good in the job, but they don't have something like you have. They don't have this vibe inside, this energy from theater, for example.
I try to be open and to try to understand, because we're translating an idea. Like the director normally has an idea about what he wants to do, and I need to make the translation into technique, but I also need to understand the director. And that's something I really like about my job, is to work with different directors, because directors are very creative people, and it's a tough job. I don't want to do it, but when I see, I really try to understand, okay, so what's the story that you try to tell, and how can I change it into technique, so eventually on image it's more it tells the story in my part of my department.
If you try to understand directors, you try to understand idea about technical part or the idea about the story of the shot?
Totally the story. The only thing is that I'm limited with technique. We always have gravity. We always have the liquid, the weight, whatever. So I know by the years now, like what's possible and what's not. And I'm maybe sometimes too open to, okay, let's try this, let's try that. So I'm really trying to understand what is needed and what's possible. But of course I have to limit sometimes the director by saying, okay, I think if we go that direction, maybe we can try an alternative, which I think is more likely and realistic, that will be the outcome and will still tell your story. But it's really different on the different directors, because some directors know exactly what they want to do, and I'm just helping them. Sometimes I'm a tool. That I'm just how do you say that? Sometimes the director only needs like the material and the way how it's been fixed, and then the effect can be done, because a lot of directors know exactly. So then it's easy. And with some directors, it's more like a collaboration in are we going this direction? And I like it both. I learn a lot from directors. Ronald Coetzee is one of the guys who knows exactly what they want. So I'm more like trying to help. It's another collaboration than a collaboration with you or with Julien. It are different collaborations, but I all like them in their own dynamics, and I'm always trying to understand what they want and what's the story, and even without discussing it. But definitely there's something in me trying to understand. That's for me important. Like, okay, so we're not going to do the balloon. That doesn't work. That's too much splashy, or that's too... So there is some...
Nice.
It's strange to talk about it, because
why?
As a special effects, I'm not the talker. It's more
like you are the talker.
The director,
believe me.
Yeah, but the director is more the talker to the client. Like,
no.
Of course, I need to talk and communicate with the director, but it's not something to...
How your cooperation with the bolt operator looks like, because for the people who don't know our market, this is like two separate things. Like a guy who's sitting behind the computer and try to find a nice movement, and another guy like you who try to prepare the nice rigs to splash something together. So there is not two different worlds. You have to work each other for the final result. So it's you know what I mean. So
I think partly understand what you mean, except that the part where I think like that isn't so difficult, or what's there to explain, I think maybe because for me it's so natural and
absolutely
and common to do. So I'm thinking like, but it's a bit like, how do you go from A to B? And I'm like, you just walk from A to B. But how to explain is a bit.
So in other way, I think, can you describe how you prepare your rigs?
But
so, for example, we have a bowl with the sauce in the middle of the table. The camera is going around the table, and I need to drop a small balls of the meat inside.
Yeah.
And how you start to preparing?
Yeah.
What is your first step? What is your next step? And what is your last step to achieve the nice shot for the director?
Well, I think because like if it's not too complicated, I prefer.
It's very complicated.
Okay, because if it's complicated, I first do it without the move. There are different things because then when you have a ball and something falls in, means that you have one or two triggers, but it's basically doing the same. Let's say that the ball is rotating, then we're getting more difficult because you need to rotate and you need the moments where something falls in. Those are two triggers. So you do it step by step. So first it's like you start to let it fall in by the conveyor belts.
So one question, can you explain what is the trigger is?
What the trigger is for the...
And the conveyor belt as well.
The conveyor belt is...
first of all, trigger.
First of all, the trigger.
What it is?
The trigger is like you have the computer device which has a timing, and it is a very like 1,000th of a second I can calculate, and of course I need a kind of pressure to keep it going in a kind of voltage. I can all prepare it with the tools I have, and then the conveyor belt. For instance, it's like a conveyor belt in different sizes. So the most common one used are around 40 centimeters to 15 centimeters, and they will be triggered by the computer.
This is the device, yeah.
Yeah, that's the device that it falls in. So you put some chicken wings on it, and it falls in the ball. So first you look what's happening when you have
like a belt in factory, something like this.
Yeah. The running belt where you're running on in the gym, but then small, and then you do it step by step. So first it's like the chicken wings falling in a certain bow, because it's also. You can do it very fast, and then it's almost like flying through the air like a rocket, or you can decide, okay, it has to be like a little curve, or it has to be going vertically. Also, already thinking about when there is a move, is it possible to get the position of the conveyor belt?
What kind of move you mean?
The move eventually from the robot. So it comes all together. Like, of course, I can put my devices wherever I want in the first place, but I'm already knowing that there's going to be like a continuous move of the robot flying over. I need to be aware that the robot has an arm too, standing to the base. So I cannot put my stand everywhere. So I need to find a position where also with the chicken wings, thinking about the image, has to come where we need to have it flying without having the device in the air. So chicken wings falling from the conveyor belt. So that's one thing in a certain position. And then we need to rotate. That's the second trigger that we're going to do. So you have a motor in a certain speed, and then that's the second step. Mostly to get these triggers easily done, you can just use an iPhone or like a high-speed, slow motion app just to see what's happening. And then the bolt comes in, but you can do it while, technique is all timed on a certain timing, which probably we like. And then the bolt comes in and we trigger the bolt, or the bolt triggers my triggers. So then it can fly over, and meanwhile then that would be the last step, almost the last step, because first you use testers in the same weight as it falls, and then the arm will fly over and in a certain speed, and we look together till we see a satisfying image. And then at the end we need to have like all the hero chickens and everything doing exactly be the same, and that it's repeatable. So everything is important, the marking of where the chickens are laying at the front. That's why it's also good to record to see if it's really happening what you think it's happening, because you can take a look at the image, but that's like 1/10 of what's really happening, and you need to see what's happening all around. Something Ronald lured me also, like I want to see from 3 sides what's happening because otherwise I cannot say what's happening in front of the camera, which is a funny thing because we're only looking at eventually at the end result, but the things around are also important just to know.
Yep.
Yeah.
In our industry, which is very visual, we all follow Instagram, or at least we should, if we are looking for inspiration. This is not a secret because this is a part of our reality now. You can see on the Instagram or YouTube, Vimeo as well, that a lot of homemade production are produced. There are creators like Slow-Mo Guys or Macro Room. I don't know, maybe you know them.
I know them.
Yeah. So I know that you approach each director's idea individually. Do you rely on proven solutions because they are sure, or do you sometimes try something new, some different approach for SFX to improve yourself?
I try to follow what's happening. To be honest, I'm not really. I how do you say that? For me, it's like popcorn to look at Slow-Mo Guys or a Macro Room, because for me it's like, yeah, I know, it's like the easy movie for me, but it's just fun to look at because sometimes they have these examples where, like, okay, if it's big, like if you have like a big a balloon and somebody's jumping on it, a balloon with water, and somebody jumping on it in the garden, like this is a setup which probably takes you a half a day to set it up and with the right camera and everything, and then here this is the example. But this is something which is not inspiring me for other stuff. Strangely enough, it are the other things which inspire me to invent new things, because on what I explained, my goal is to do something new and to invent. That was my pleasure when we started, to do something new. Like, okay, we can do a 1 meter by 1 meter vortex. Is that possible? That was the question that we asked ourselves. And Ronald said, yes, of course. I have one in my bathtub. Maybe it's not 1 by 1, but we can do it. And then Rijn and I were both looking like, okay, well, if he says it's right, he's probably right. He's also working in Asia and everywhere over the world, so probably he's right. So we started doing this thing with the 1 meter by 1 meter because we had to, it was for Coca-Cola, I guess. We had to throw in like the full fruit, like the full banana and the full apple. So we needed a big vortex. We couldn't do on a small size. We want the real, okay. So surely, but slowly, we found out with all the measures and the forces that everything was happening, that eventually we managed. But that's the challenging thing. Probably it took us like I think a week, or maybe it was longer, I don't remember. But those are the fun things to do something new when there's a little bit of budget to get it done. And then eventually you done it. And then for me, the funny thing was at the end, when we talked about it and we finished the shoot, and then we said, but Ronald, are you 100% sure that what you started by saying, this vortex, it has to be possible, that you knew that it was possible? He said, yeah, it's only the bathtub that I knew. And then that was the moment when I started looking at the bathtub and I thought, like, that's not a real vortex. That's just one line. That's not the vortex what he was talking about. But just to give the carrot for the monkey, just to have to make it a bit further before you're like, oh, it could be possible. That's the challenging thing. And of course, things cannot succeed, but then at least by trying it, every time you learn new things.
Yep.
And that's the thing, like, it's not talking about theater. It's not like going to the same theater group or the same play over and over again. Of course, like going to a Hamlet in different versions, it's nice to do. But for me, it's not about the Hamlet. For me, it's the Hamlet.
About the version.
But it's also the meme. It's also all the different kind of... Going to the same museum is not...
True.
It's interesting, but it's like the diversity which makes it interesting, which gives me another thought. Just taking another route, like going to your work and taking, which is exactly thinking about it, the thing I did when I went to the film studio. I lived in Amsterdam East, and the studio was in West. And every day when I went there just to learn the city, I just take another route just to see what's happening. But basically that's what I try to do every time with our job, to get something new, something different.
This is very good example, this Hamlet play. Any directors who want to show to the viewers his own version of Hamlet, it's all the time about the Hamlet. You want to find something different to show the viewers your version. Do you have the same feeling with the two splashes tomato together, two smashes tomato together? Because this is like a Hamlet. Okay, I want to play my Hamlet again for my customers, for my view, and I ask you, okay, Merijn, this is the new Hamlet, but we need to do something which you did many times, but in different way. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but maybe it's better to explain that for me it's not. For me, it's not Hamlet only in the different versions. That would be the tabletop situation we are right now, and we're all trying to invent something new. For me, it's more like the story that you want to tell. For me, it's the storytelling. So for me, it's not like the Hamlet in different versions. Yep. For me, it's like you got a Hamlet in different versions, but you also got mime, and you also got concerts, and you also got all these different ways of expressing art. That's what's inspiring me, and that's what I try to understand if I have to do something new. So I can think about the perspective from the director that you like. We're thinking about the two splashing tomatoes. I'm thinking about you have the tomato and you have an idea of how to get this in our film, and then I'm thinking about so there is another way to tell something about the two tomatoes, and then I think it's my part to give suggestions in we can maybe do it in a different way, and that's for me the challenge to find something which is interesting, but it's not something that I can think on my own, and that's something, that's the collaboration which is important in what we're doing. So it's not that if I have a director who doesn't have any idea about, only knows Hamlet, I cannot explain about mime, because the director needs to understand that there are different ways to get to something new. So that's what I'm saying. That's really something not for me, because I'm not the creativity only as a director in the story that you want to tell. So for me, it's I have to understand what's the direction or what's the style of the director. What's the style of you? What are the styles of Ronald? So this is we cannot be rough, or we have to be rough, or we have to be more splashy, or we have to be like very solid, because that makes it clear. I have to understand the style of the film, but also of the director, because that's the another good example, which was really an eye-opener for me, because as you can imagine, I was 17, 18 years old when I started. Wil van der Vlucht Film Productions, a photographer, and Ronald also a photographer. I never had a photography background, but just to be with them, they had a certain style of lighting, and it's a nice style, in their shootings. Then I luckily met, because of 360 in Italy, Milan, Antonella Scogliero, I met Food Film. They worked there, and it was like the completely opposite way that I understood how you lit your object or your product, or it was like mind-blowing for me, because like it's a completely different setup, and looking at the result, it's so beautiful. I like it both, but it's like a completely
two different schools.
Totally. And it was so inspiring to see that in another simple way, and that's something I know because I got photography in a very simple low level, but there is like the way you lit things, and you have to understand what's possible and what's not. So it's really about style of a director to know, like, okay, if I position this lobster, or if I position this, I have to position it in this way. And that's very inspiring to see that. For instance, food film, which I think they're in their league, like one of the best, they know exactly what you can and what you cannot do, or what you need to add to get something to a story. And that's that's very inspiring and fun to work in that way, to see, okay, so now they want to have like an extra shot, and then I see the edit and I'm like, it makes totally sense what they're doing. And that's very nice. But I can tell you this because of the schooling of Ronald and Will. Like, it's a different way, because Ronald and Will, they're doing the same. Or it's completely different. Yeah.
Yep. So,
but this is like a big, because they're very contrary in some way. For me, that's a good way to give this example. Because like there are all these variations in between. It's more this, it's more that. Like if I can tell you about Julien, for instance, he's more of cosmetics. It's also inspiring to see, like, this is for me another dimension. Like every time I got inspired by different dimensions of how you can approach your style, or approach your way of telling your story. For you also, the way you work, you have a kind of style. And slowly, by just working with you, I try to understand, okay, so this is, it's that perspective that makes it more dynamic. And eventually it's the end result when I see the edit, then I'm like, it's the speed ramping. And that's why it didn't matter, because I was concerned about this point when there was this drop coming out and you already knew, we're not going to see it. And I'm like, yeah, but in my terms of getting you the best result, I need to solve it. And you're like, no. So I really need you as a leader, to the directors as leaders, to know, like, no, that you don't need that. I need to fill in your story.
Yep, this makes sense, because result is always good if you understand what's you doing.
But many times I don't have an idea. Like you try to explain, but you know your limits, you know your framing, and that's something I don't know. And
you're right.
Maybe even you know your limits. That's what I mean. Like food film knows what their limits are. Ronald knows, like, okay, this is my range where I have to be, but it's always different for me. So I have to also, like, okay, if he says it's right, it's right. And
You said about the, do you need water? Yeah. This is not water, but
okay, so that's why it's so tasty.
You said something about the Ronald school or direction. So I had a huge fun when I saw Ronald's note on his show reel about I never used CGI or something. You remember?
Yeah.
So that was my next question. I want to ask you about the CGI now. Personally, I love to shoot with real stuff. I love this kind of unpredictability and be surprised on the set, because I don't think the liquids shots will be replaced by CGI the near future for a simple reason. This is the production time. I'm just talking about the commercials market, but this is my point of view. What do you think, Merijn? Where is the tabletop going compared SFX to CGI?
I can only tell from my part that I'm doing it for real. So there is no CGI for me. So it depends on the directors how much CGI you want to add. The only thing, in my experience, because how do you call it? It's deformation, because you're in the job. So every commercial I see, even if it's a photo image, I try to see, or if something is unnatural, then I'm like, is it real? So if my eye sketches some parts in the splash or something on a photo or in a film, then I'm like, is this real or not? And of course I don't know, but sometimes I try to find out, like, is this CGI or not? But there's definitely a difference, and that's the specialty, I think, of nature, that our eye sees most of the time if it's CGI or not. Like, maybe for most of the people they don't care, but I get comfortable, again, talking about food film, I get comfortable because they're so iconic about that it's real. Like, even like hazelnuts, we're pretty much used to use like mock-ups, so big ones. Some of them are like 6 or 8 centimeters big. I know that it's a mock-up. It is very clear. We're not talking about CGI, but talking about the mock-up, which makes our life so much easier and so much nicer, because you can do a lot more with the shot. But you almost feel like, okay, this is too good to be true. Although this is our market, like this is our job to do it like that. So CGI is like out of my league, but on the other end, I like it when it's real. Another film I made, also cosmetics, it's Florena. I was so surprised by just doing it for real, like to get a flower which is like a normal flower which is used in the product, and I was testing a bit. I think I was busy for 1 or 2 weeks, I guess, and it was like eureka when something happened. Just nature, just feeling, you cannot imagine if, in this case for Florena, that there was color in the flower. It was a full purple flower, and I added some stuff in there, transparent, to see like, okay, what's happening. And on macro niveau, the color came out of the flower, which was the story that needed to be told, that you extract the nice things about the flowers to get it in our product. So something that you wanted to tell in a story, maybe you needed CGI or something else, or like syringes, and you tried to use editing to get to the story, and it all happened in one image by just adding a transparent color in there with the flower, and the color came out, but in a way that we could never do it with a syringe, because then it's gone. It doesn't have the natural feeling. And if you would do it in CGI, you probably won't imagine it. And that's the whole thing with nature, that it happens in a certain way, in a certain pattern. If you zoom in or if you zoom out, there is a pattern. There is, talking again, about the bigger picture of this all. So I'm very fond of the real stuff, to really be surprised by what nature does, because it has so much to see. If you get the attention and the focus on the things, it's
and yeah, absolutely, I'm agree with you. So the next thing is, like I said, so this unexpected situation when you again collide two tomatoes each other, you never expect what will happen. So no. if you will start to figure it out, this kind of situation in post-production in CGI, you need to be very precisely about everything, about the shadows, how they touch each other, stuff like that. So this is more creative, but less nature.
Yeah, and also the funny thing with, if you have a setup with liquids, with 3 tubes, some liquid coming out, I change 1 or 2 parameters, and we got a completely different shot.
Yep.
And it's just happening 1 minute later. And with those things, you can really make big differences, and it has a natural feeling. That's the thing. Like, do we believe that this is like, yeah? And you can see, because it's a natural movement, which is something in CGI you need to think about or have an example, or you need something, a reference.
Okay, but I have a question. How you explain the situation? You said that you like natural feeling for our project. How you explain the situation when we use the mock-ups? This is not a natural way.
That's not
we
natural.
try to be natural.
Sometimes you need to to have a mock-up, because then you can do something which in your imagination is happening, in the story it's happening, in your natural feeling it's happening, but you cannot do it on a macro size, because then you're like you're in a dollhouse. You cannot play in a dollhouse. You need to have like
you need to resize some strawberry or berries or stuff like
but
that.
But strawberries, for example, they have these little hairs. So it's
like a green part. No, hairs on it.
The little hairs.
Yeah.
So it's very complicated to make a nice mock-up of it, and that's exactly also the natural thing that we are working with, which sometimes the natural is better because it's nice, which is also a funny thing thinking about it. Like, there were many times when I was working and I thought about, how do I understand this, what's happening with the liquid or what's happening with sand, and then I'm thinking back, like, probably when I was a kid, and I think most of us in our business, we remember from our childhood trying things like, okay, what will happen if I just throw something over the table? How will it react on the table and on the carpet and on the chairs? Of course, we didn't care at that moment, and our mothers and fathers would be very angry about it. But it's a big, how do you say it? Big experience for us that we did it in the past, and that we can use it now to understand what will happen. Yep. It's a very important thing that kids play, and that they can do these things. I'm having so much fun with the kids to see that they enjoy the nature and how everything works. Like, it's so much needed instead of sitting behind the screens. Just go out, go into the woods, climb in the trees, because then you will feel, then you will use all your senses.
You can touch it, yeah.
which is so important. Also, just fabric. It's these things where I think about, okay, that's what I probably did when I was young, by being in the woods and to understand nature, which also satisfies me to see that it's real or not. And maybe that's where we learn it. That's my guess, but it helps me a lot nowadays with materials and textures and everything we're using to get the nice result. If a client wants something, I'm really getting this knowledge, try to understand.
You say many good words about the directors, but I want to ask you about something different. What is the most difficult thing about working with the directors? So can you go ahead to tell me what annoys you about our work like directors, so that we can prepare ourselves to be better?
I think the main.
I need your advice.
The only thing I can say, I don't think you need advice, but the only thing which in the past annoys me, if it's not a real collaboration, if it's like, Merijn, do your trick.
Okay.
That, I'm sorry. Of course, I wanted to do something new, but I want to be challenged, but it doesn't have to be always like that. Like, if you have five or six shots at a day, I only need one tricky shot where I can really get something going in there. And for the other shots, if it's something I did in the past and it's a little bit different, I'm fine. And we don't need to do like a show every 6 times on a day, but at least one is nice to do, and the director needs to understand. And it's not a matter of can you do it 6 times?
Yep.
It's no use. It's after all, and I think you totally agree. It's a collaboration. It's a team effort. It's like every part in the every crew member is important on that day, and that's how, in my opinion, you get the best result. You need the kind of family to get it done, and that's how I used to work, and that's how I like to work. So, and that's the other thing. I'm really blessed and thankful for the chances that I got. Of course, I have to work for it, and I like to work for it. But eventually it's also something that I'm grateful that I got my chances and that people gave me the trust of doing it. For me, it's important to have a positive vibe on set. That was the second thing I want to tell you. My part of job, you have like building. Sometimes it takes hours. Like for instance, if I go to Milan, I have a difficult shot to do. I have it all packed in a bag, which can be more than 23 kilos. So if I have to put it in there, I think about up front, like, can I set it up, again, like MacGyver, with all the materials I have to set up the bomb? Like, is it possible? So to get that done, I need some hours of preparation in the studio. And then it's nice to have some music and to have like a director who's interested but also knows, okay, now I need to come. Now I have to let him do his thing and don't ask questions about things because this is just building. So this is building time. And again, this is why it's good when a director understands what you're doing and that they're not asking things which are not important for me at that moment. So the thing to understand, and hopefully in the opposite way, I try to do the same for the director, to understand when we're on a set with 3 sets, I'm always, besides that I'm doing the special effects, I'm trying to have an overview on the other 2 sets. Like sometimes I have people working for me, the special effect assistants, and I need to say, okay, you need to keep on working on this set. And when I'm thinking, okay, maybe it's better if my assistant goes to one set so I can do the other set, which is more easy to keep it going than the other set while it's just repeating and getting the fruits in the air or getting something repeatable when we got the nice shot. Sometimes you do like 100 times. Then it's easier when I go to the other set and my assistant goes to the first set. And that's why I try to have an overview, which I can help sometimes, it depends on the director, to get eventually, we can stop by the end of the day and that it's not like 12 at night. And we have because I also know, I'm aware that the director also has to go to the client and has to explain about, okay, this is something we need to change. Meanwhile, we'll keep on going with the testing. And if I see nothing is happening, it's good that it keeps on going while the director is talking to the client. So we get as much done in the time that is there for the shooting. So I was talking about the vibe, that the atmosphere is also important. And in the past, I had these directors when they started shouting or they said like out of frustration of themselves that.
This is difficulties.
These are difficulties
Okay.
and I can totally understand that if the director promises something to the client and it doesn't work in the way he wanted to work and he doesn't have any clue how to get it done, but when he puts it on your shoulders, those are the things which are difficult. When you're like, yeah, but I'm also out of my comfort zone and I need to find a solution, but I prefer to do it together with the director because, again, I don't have an idea about what the director is going to sell. I have a partly idea, but I don't know the boundaries. I don't know the framing of what he exactly wants to. I know more or less the story, but I don't know what's the freedom that we have. So I need the director, and if the director says it has to be like this or that, then it's like, I'm sorry, but that makes it difficult. During the years, you get used to it, like, okay, these are things we can and we cannot say just to help. But yeah, like I said, for me, it's not only special effects. It's not only my technical department, but it's also thinking about the whole crew on set, that everybody is happy to work together. Because from my experience, if the crew is happy and we know what we're doing, you get the best results. And I'm not talking about dancing all over the floor. I'm talking about know what we're doing and we're all focused, because focused eventually is a very important thing in our job.
So this is the good time to finish with this kind of topic. I like that.
How many questions do you got left?
I don't remember.
Oh.
So it's good to finish with this kind of vibe, but I have just a last question because tomorrow we have a next shooting day. So and we have some nice interesting shots ahead of us. So, but I have a last question. Are we going to wine or are we going to sleep before tomorrow.
Well, it's definitely the
This
wine.
is this is 11 p.m. right now. Okay, take a rest before tomorrow.
Yeah, you
Thanks-
too.
thanks
I
a lot.
think you need
Thanks
it
a
too.
lot.
But it's a nice production that we're working on. So
Absolutely.
I saw something nice today. So probably it will be fine.
Absolutely.
Again, thank you, Jacek.
Thank you, Merijn. So, if you want to get in touch with Merijn and see his works, take a look on his website foodsfx.nl. foodsfx.nl. And finally, I invite you to write to me at the address podcast@jacekszymański.pl, podcast@jacekszymański.pl. I know that the podcast is very industry specific, but maybe I'm reaching listeners who don't know anything about our industry. Let me know. I'm very curious about your opinion and I'm waiting for your emails, ideas and information. You can also write on Instagram, Jacek Szymański Food. Have a good one. Bon appétit!